The anthem booms in my ears, and then I hear Caesar Flickerman greeting the audience. Does he know how crucial it is to get every word right from now on? He must. He will want to help us. The crowd breaks into applause as the prep teams are presented. I imagine Flavius, Venia, and Octavia bouncing around and taking ridiculous bobbing bows. It's a safe bet they're clueless. Then Effie's introduced. How long she's waited for this moment. I hope she's able to enjoy it because as misguided as Effie can be, she has a very keen instinct about certain things, and must at least suspect we're in trouble. Portia and Cinna receive huge cheers, of course. They've been brilliant, had a dazzling debut. I now understand Cinna's choice of dress for me tonight. I'll need to look as girlish and innocent as possible. Haymitch's appearance brings a round of stomping that goes on for at least 5 minutes. Well, he's accomplished a first, keeping not only one but 2 tributes alive. What if he hadn't warned me in time? Would I have acted differently? Flaunted the moment with the berries in the Capitol's face? No, I don't think so. But I could easily have been a lot less convincing than I need to be now, right now, because I can feel the plate lifting me up to the stage. Blinding lights. The deafening roar rattles the metal under my feet. Then there's Peeta just a few yards away. He looks so clean and healthy and beautiful. I can hardly recognize him. But his smile is the same whether in mud or in the Capitol, and when I see it, I take about 3 steps and fling myself into his arms. He staggers back, almost losing his balance, and that's when I realize the slim metal contraption in his hand is some kind of cane. He rights himself, and we just cling to each other while the audience goes insane. He's kissing me, and all the time I'm thinking, Do you know how much danger we're in? After about 10 minutes of this, Caesar Flickerman taps on his shoulder to continue the show, and Peeta just pushes him aside without even glancing at him. The audience goes berserk. Whether he knows it or not, Peeta is, as usual, playing the crowd exactly right. Finally, Haymitch interrupts us and gives us a good-natured shove toward the victor's chair. Usually this is a single ornate chair from which the winning tribute watches a film of the highlights of the games. But since there are 2 of us, the game makers have provided a plush red velvet couch. A small one. My mother would call it a love seat, I think. I sit so close to Peeta that I'm practically on his lap, but one look from Haymitch tells me it isn't enough. Kicking off my sandals, I tuck my feet to the side and lean my head against Peeta's shoulder. His arm goes around me automatically, and I feel like I'm back in the cave, curled up against him, trying to keep warm. His shirt is made of the same yellow material as my dress, but Portia's put him in long black pants. No sandals either, but a pair of sturdy black boots he keeps solidly planted on the stage. I wish Cinna had given me a similar outfit. I feel so vulnerable in this flimsy dress, but I guess that was the point. Caesar Flickerman makes a few more jokes, then it's time for the show. This will last exactly 3 hours and is required viewing for all of Pen M. As the lights dim and the seal appears on the screen, I realize I'm unprepared for this. I do not want to watch my 22 fellow tributes die. I saw enough of them die the first time. My heart starts pounding and I have a strong impulse to run. How have the other victors faced this alone? During the highlights, they periodically show the winner's reaction up on a box in the corner of the screen. I think back to earlier years. Some were triumphant, pumping their fists in the air, beating their chests. Most just seem stunned. All I know is that the only thing keeping me on this love seat is Peeta, his arm around my shoulder, his other hand claimed by both of mine. Of course, the previous victors didn't have the Capitol looking for a way to destroy them. Condensing several weeks into 3 hours is quite a feat, especially when you consider how many cameras were going at once. Whoever puts together the highlights has to choose what sort of story to tell. This year, for the first time, they tell a love story. I know Peeta and I won, but a disproportionate amount of time is spent on us, right from the beginning. I'm glad, though, because it supports the whole crazy in love thing that my defense was for defying the Capitol. Plus, it means we won't have as much time to linger over the deaths. The first half hour or so focuses on pre-arena events, the reaping, the chariot ride through the Capitol, our training scores, and our interviews. There's this sort of upbeat soundtrack playing under it that makes it twice as awful because, of course, almost everyone on screen is dead. Once we're in the arena, there's detailed coverage of the bloodbath, and then the filmmakers basically alternate between shots of tributes dying and shots of us. Mostly Peeta, really. There's no question he's carrying this romance thing on his shoulders. Now I see what the audience saw, how he misled the careers about me, stayed awake the entire night under the tracker-jacker tree, fought Cato to let me escape, and even while he lay in that mud bank, whispered my name in his sleep. I seem heartless in comparison, dodging fireballs, dropping nests, and blowing up supplies, until I go hunting for Rue. They play her death in full, the spearing, my failed rescue attempt, my arrow through the boy from District 1's throat, Rue drawing her last breath in my arms, and the song. I get to sing every note of the song. Something inside me shuts down, and I'm too numb to feel anything. It's like watching complete strangers in another Hunger Games. But I do notice they omit the part where I covered her in flowers. Right, because even that smacks of rebellion. Things pick up for me once they've announced 2 tributes from the same district can live, and I shout out Peta's name and then clap my hands over my mouth. If I've seemed indifferent to him earlier, I make up for it now by finding him, nursing him back to health, going to the feast for the medicine, and being very free with my kisses. Objectively, I can see the Mutts and Cato's death are as gruesome as ever, but again, I feel it happens to people I have never met. And then comes the moment with the berries. I can hear the audience hushing one another, not wanting to miss anything. A wave of gratitude to the filmmaker sweeps over me when they end not with the announcement of our victory, but with me pounding on the glass door of the hovercraft, screaming Peta's name as they try to revive him. In terms of survival, it's my best moment all night. The anthem's playing yet again, and we rise as President Snow himself takes the stage, followed by a little girl carrying a cushion that holds a crown. There's just one crown, though, and you can hear the crowd's confusion. Whose head will he place it on? Until President Snow gives it a twist and it separates into 2 halves. He places the first around Peta's brow with a smile. He's just smiling when he settles the second on my head, but his eyes, just inches from mine, are as unforgiving as a snake's. That's when I know that even though both of us would have eaten the berries, I am to blame for having the idea. I'm the instigator. I'm the one to be punished. Much bowing and cheering follows. My arm is about to fall off from waving when Caesar Flickerman finally bids the audience good night, reminding them to tune in tomorrow for the final interviews, as if they have a choice. Peta and I are whisked to the president's mansion for the victory banquet, where we have very little time to eat as Capitol officials and particularly generous sponsors elbow one another out of the way as they try to get their pictures with us. Face after beaming face flashes by, becoming increasingly intoxicated as the evening wears on. Occasionally I catch a glimpse of Haymitch, which is reassuring, or President Snow, which is terrifying. But I keep laughing and thanking people and smiling as my picture is taken. The one thing I never do is let go of Peta's hand. The sun is just peeking over the horizon when we stagger back to the 12th floor of the training center. I think now I'll finally get a word alone with Peta, but Haymitch sends him off with Portia to find something fitted for the interview and personally escorts me to my door. Why can't I talk to him? I ask. Plenty of time for talk when we get home, says Haymitch. Go to bed. You're on air at 2. Despite Haymitch's running interference, I'm determined to see Peta privately. My first thought is to check the roof, but it's empty. Even the city streets far below are deserted after the celebration last night. I go back to bed for a while and then decide to go directly to his room, but when I try to turn the knob, I find my own bedroom door has been locked from the outside. I suspect Haymitch initially, but then there's a more insidious fear that the Capitol may be monitoring and confining me. I've been unable to escape since the Hunger Games began, but this feels different, much more personal. This feels like I've been imprisoned for a crime and I'm awaiting sentencing. I quickly get back in bed and pretend to sleep until Effie Trinket comes to alert me to the start of another big day. I have about 5 minutes to eat a bowl of hot grain and stew before the prep team descends. All I have to say is, the crowd loved you, and it's unnecessary to speak for the next couple of hours. When Cinna comes in, he shoos them out and dresses me in a white gauzy dress and pink shoes. Then he personally adjusts my makeup until I seem to radiate a soft, rosy glow. We make idle chit-chat, but I'm afraid to ask him anything of real importance because after the incident with the door, I can't shake the feeling that I'm being watched constantly. The interview takes place right down the hall in the sitting room. A space has been cleared and the love seat has been moved in and surrounded by vases of red and pink roses. There's only a handful of cameras to record the event, no live audience at least. Caesar Flickerman gives me a warm hug when I come in. Congratulations, Katniss. How are you faring? Fine. Nervous about the interview, I say. Don't be. We're going to have a fabulous time, he says, giving me a reassuring pat. I'm not as good at talking about myself, I say. Nothing you say will be wrong, he says. I think, oh, Caesar, if only that were true. But actually, President Snow may be arranging some sort of accident for me as we speak. Then Pete is there looking handsome in red and white, pulling me off to the side. I hardly get to see you. Haymitch seems bent on keeping us apart. Haymitch is actually bent on keeping us alive, but there are too many ears listening, so I just say, yes, he's gotten very responsible lately. Well, there's just this, and we go home. Then he can't watch us all the time, says Peta. I feel a sort of shiver run through me, and there's no time to analyze why, because they're ready for us. We sit somewhat formally on the love seat, but Caesar says, oh, go ahead and curl up next to him if you want. It looked very sweet. So I tuck my feet up, and Peta pulls me in close to him. Someone counts backward, and just like that, we're being broadcast live to the entire country. Caesar Flickerman is wonderful, teasing, joking, getting choked up when the occasion presents itself. He and Peta already have the rapport they established that night of the first interview. That easy banter. So I just smile a lot and try to speak as little as possible. I mean, I have to talk some, but as soon as I can redirect the conversation back to Peta. Eventually, though, Caesar begins to pose questions that insist on fuller answers. Well, Peeta, we know from our days in the cave that it was love at first sight for you from, what, age 5, Caesar says. From the moment I laid eyes on her, says Peeta. But Katniss, what a ride for you. I think the real excitement for the audience was watching you fall for him. When did you realize you were in love with him? Asked Caesar. Oh, that's a hard one. I gave a faint, breathy laugh, and I looked down at my hands. Help. Well, I know when it hit me. That night you shouted out his name from that tree, says Caesar. Thank you, Caesar. I think, and then go with his idea. Yes, I guess that was it. I mean, until that point, I just tried not to think about what my feelings might be, honestly, because it was so confusing, and it only made things worse if I actually cared about him. But then, in the tree, everything changed, I say. Why do you think that was? Urges Caesar. Maybe, because for the first time, there was a chance I could keep him, I say. Behind a cameraman, I see Haymitch give a sort of huff with relief, and I know I've said the right thing. Caesar pulls out a handkerchief and has to take a moment because he's so moved. I can feel Peeta press his forehead into my temple, and he asks, So now that you've got me, what are you going to do with me? I turn into him, put you somewhere where you can't get hurt. And when he kisses me, people in the room actually sigh. For Caesar, this is a natural place to segue into all the things we did get hurt in the arena, from burns to stings to wounds, but it's not until we get around to the mutts that I forget I'm on camera. When Caesar asks Peeta how his new leg is working out. New leg, I say, and I can't help reaching out and pulling up the bottom of Peeta's pants. Oh no, I whisper, taking in the metal and plastic device that has replaced his flesh. No one told you? Asks Caesar gently. I shake my head. I haven't had a chance, says Peeta with a slight shrug. It's my fault, I say, because I used that tourniquet. Yes, it's your fault I'm alive, says Peeta. He's right, says Caesar. He'd have bled to death for sure without it. I guess this is true, but I can't help feeling upset about it to the extent that I'm afraid I might cry. And then I remember everyone in the country is watching me, so I just bury my face in Peeta's shirt. It takes them a couple of minutes to coax me back out, because it's better in the shirt, where no one can see me. And when I do come out, Caesar backs off questioning me so I can recover. In fact, he pretty much leaves me alone until the berries come up. Katniss, I know you've had a shock, but I got to ask. The moment when you pulled out those berries, what was going on in your mind? He says. I take a long pause before I answer, trying to collect my thoughts. This is a crucial moment where I either challenge the Capitol or went so crazy at the idea of losing Peeta that I can't be held responsible for my actions. It seems to call for a big dramatic speech, but all I can get out is one almost inaudible sentence. I don't know. I just couldn't bear the thought of being without him. Peeta, anything to add? Asks Caesar. No, I think that goes for both of us, he says. Caesar signs off, and it's over. Everyone's laughing and crying and hugging, but I'm not sure until I reach Haymitch. Okay, I whisper. Perfect, he answers. I go back to my room to collect a few things and find there's nothing to take but the Mockingjay pin Madge gave me. Someone returned it to my room after the games. They drive us through the streets in a car with blackened windows, and the train's waiting for us. We barely have time to say goodbye to Cinna and Portia, although we'll see them in a few months when we tour the districts for a round of victory ceremonies. It's the Capitol's way of reminding people that the Hunger Games never really go away. We'll be given a lot of useless plaques, and everyone will have to pretend they love us. The train begins moving, and we're plunged into night until we clear the tunnel, and I take my first free breath since the reaping. Effie is accompanying us back, and Haymitch too, of course. We eat an enormous dinner and settle into silence in front of the television to watch a replay of the interview. With the Capitol growing further away every second, I begin to think of home, of Prim and my mother, of Gale. I excuse myself to change out of my dress and into a plain shirt and pants. As I slowly, thoroughly wash the makeup from my face and put my hair in its braid, I begin transforming back into myself, Katniss Everdeen, a girl who lives in the scene, hunts in the woods, trades in the hob. I stare in the mirror as I try to remember who I am and who I'm not. By the time I join the others, the pressure of Peeta's arm around my shoulder feels alien. When the train makes a brief stop for fuel, we're allowed to go outside for some fresh air. There's no longer any need to guard us. Peeta and I walk down along the track hand in hand, and I can't find anything to say now that we're alone. He stops to gather a bunch of wildflowers for me. When he presents them, I work hard to look pleased, because he can't know that the pink and white flowers are the top of wild onions and only remind me of the hours I've spent gathering them with Gale. Gale. The idea of seeing Gale in a matter of hours makes my stomach churn. But why? I can't frame it in my mind. I only know that I feel like I've been lying to someone who trusts me. Or, more accurately, to two people. I've been getting away with it up to this point because of the games, but there will be no games to hide behind back home. What's wrong? Peeta asks. Nothing, I answer. We continue walking past the end of the train, out where even I'm fairly sure there are no cameras hidden in the scrubby bushes along the track. Still, no words come. Hamish startles me when he lays a hand on my back. Even now, in the middle of nowhere, he keeps his voice down. Great job, you two. Just keep it up in the district until the cameras are gone. We should be okay. I watch him head back to the train, avoiding Peeta's eyes. What's he mean? Peeta asks me. It's the Capitol. They didn't like our stunt with the berries, I blurt out. What? What are you talking about? He says. It seemed too rebellious, so Hamish has been coaching me through the last few days, so I didn't make it worse, I say. Coaching you, but not me, says Peeta. He knew you were smart enough to get it right, I say. I didn't know there was anything to get right, says Peeta. So what you're saying is, these last few days, and then I guess back in the arena, that was just some strategy you two worked out? No, I mean, I couldn't even talk to him in the arena, could I? I stammer. But you knew what he wanted you to do, didn't you? He says. Says Peeta. I bite my lip. Katniss. He drops my hand and I take a step, as if to catch my balance. It was all for the games, Peeta says. How you acted. Not all of it, I say, tightly holding on to my flowers. Then how much? No, forget that. I guess the real question is, what's going to be left when we get home, he says. I don't know. The closer we get to District 12, the more confused I get, I say. He waits for further explanation, but none's forthcoming. Well, let me know when you work that out, he says, and the pain in his voice is palpable. I know my ears are healed because even with the rumble of the engine, I can hear every step he takes back to the train. By the time I've climbed aboard, Peeta has disappeared into his room for the night. I don't see him the next morning either. In fact, the next time he turns up, we're pulling into District 12. He gives me a nod, his face expressionless. I want to tell him he's not being fair, that we were strangers, that I did what it took to stay alive, to keep us both alive in the arena, that I can't explain how things are with Gale because I don't know myself, that it's no good loving me because I'm never going to get married anyway, and he'd just end up hating me later instead of sooner, that I do have feelings for him. It doesn't matter because I'll never be able to afford the kind of love that leads to a family, to children. And how can he? How can he after what we've just been through? I also want to tell him how much I already miss him, but that wouldn't be fair on my part. So we just stand there silently, watching our grimy little station rise up around us. Through the window, I can see the platforms thick with cameras. Everyone be eagerly watching our homecoming. Out of the corner of my eye, I see Peeta extend his hand. I look at him, unsure. One more time, for the audience, he says. His voice isn't angry, it's hollow, which is worse. Already the boy with the bread is slipping away from me. I take his hand, holding on tightly, preparing for the cameras, and dreading the moment when I will finally have to let go. End of Book 1.